Chapter 10 analyzes the foreign policy of the European Union towards its neighbouring regions, including sections on the Western Balkans, on the EU's eastern neighbourhood and its southern neighbourhood, including the Mediterranean region and the Middle East. In each section we pay attention to the EU's relational foreign policy, including its reaction on crises and conflicts, and its structural foreign policy, assessing how the EU tries to influence the political, legal, economic and societal structures of these regions. The chapter also includes a separate section on the EU's European Neighbourhood Policy, or ENP. This is the overarching framework for the EU's policy towards its eastern and southern neighbourhoods, the countries in Eastern Europe, in the Southern Caucasus, the Middle East and Northern Africa. This European Neighbourhood Policy reflects the objective formulated in Article 8 of the Treaty on European Union, and I quote, "The Union shall develop a special relationship with neighbouring countries, aiming to establish an area of prosperity and good neighbourliness, founded on the values of the Union and characterized by close and peaceful relations based on cooperation," which all sounds very positive. In this short video, we will mainly focus on this European Neighbourhood Policy.
The ENP was launched in 2004. This is not a coincidence, because 2004 was also the year of the EU's enlargement towards Central and Eastern Europe. The 2004 enlargement also implied that the border of the EU moved to the east and that the EU got new neighbours. The questions that were arising at that time were: how would the EU define its relations with these new neighbours in the east? And how could the EU in the meantime also strengthen its relations with the countries at the other side of the Mediterranean in its southern neighbourhood? And the answer of the European Union to these questions was the European Neighbourhood Policy. The political idea behind the ENP was that the EU was unwilling or unable to give these countries the option of accession to the EU, but with the ENP it offered its neighbours a deepening of political and economic relations as well as more people-to-people dialogue. And the ENP also intended to support the neighbouring countries in their political, economic and institutional reforms.
At first glance, the ENP was a perfect example of a comprehensive structural foreign policy. The EU not only supported structural changes on a declaratory level, but it also devised comprehensive action plans covering all sectors of politics, society and economy. And these were underpinned by significant budgetary means and managed by the Commission through an extensive bureaucratic apparatus. And also very important, the European Neighbourhood Policy seemed to provide an answer to calls for structural reforms in several of these countries in the neighbourhoods. Not surprisingly, the relevance and impact of the ENP was very uneven across countries and sectors. But from the start, it was also undermined by several ambiguities and limitations. For example, the ENP was conceived by the majority of the member states as a way to avoid further enlargement, but several eastern neighbours hoped that active involvement in the ENP could nevertheless lead to a membership perspective. Furthermore, the action plans were seen as reflecting more the EU's priorities than the needs and priorities of the neighbouring countries. And the advantages offered by the EU were in general perceived as too limited regarding the opening of European markets, mobility and budgets.
Some developments in the neighbourhood seemed to go in the direction that the EU had hoped for. But at the end of the day, it turned out differently, and the ENP did not deliver on the objectives that the EU had set for itself. In the EU's southern neighbourhood, the Arab revolts, which started in 2011, pointed to strong endogenous support for structural reforms the EU was also promoting. However, the Arab revolts and the subsequent elections did not lead to a more pro-European government or to more pro-European movements. And the EU was not considered as being able to deliver what people had asked for, namely bread, dignity and justice. The Arab revolts ultimately failed in nearly every country, leading to authoritarian regimes and a decline of the EU's influence in the region. In the EU's eastern neighbourhood, and particularly in Ukraine, the Euromaidan protests of 2014 and the subsequent pro-EU policies and reforms in Ukraine initially suggested a success for the EU. But these pro-European developments were paralleled by an increasing antagonism in the relations with Russia, with the Russian invasion in Ukraine in 2022, leading to a new full-scale war within Europe. The relationship with Europe and other major powers in the world and in that region is the topic of chapter 11 of the book and of the next video.